UK exports to the EU as a whole are down nearly 60%. Brexit has led to additional trade restrictions and to kilometers of truck traffic jams at the borders. Trade in goods between the EU and Great Britain collapsed in the first month after the British left the European single market. EU exports to Great Britain fell by 27.4% in January compared to the same month last year, as the statistics agency Eurostat announced on Thursday. British exports to Europe were even reduced by 59.5%. As a result, the foreign trade surplus with Great Britain rose to 11.6 billion euros from 9 billion in the same period of the previous year. The 27 EU countries reportedly exported goods worth 18 billion euros to the former member state. British exports to the EU meanwhile amounted to 6.4 billion euros. Last week, the British Statistics Agency put the slump in exports to the EU at 41% and imports at 29%. The differences can be explained by differences in the methodology. Due to the special Brexit regulation for Northern Ireland, Eurostat reports trade with the British province differently than with the rest of the United Kingdom. As a result of Brexit, Great Britain left the EU internal market and the customs union on January 1st. Additional formalities and surcharges had a major impact on trade. There were also travel restrictions and order delays due to the corona pandemic. Because of the pandemic, trade with other countries also decreased. According to Eurostat, EU imports from third countries fell by 16.9% in the first month of the year, while exports fell by 10.8%. Overall, the EU recorded a trade surplus of 8.4 billion euros in January, compared with a deficit of 2.2 billion euros in the same month last year. And in the whole Brexit shenanigans, how risky is doing business with the British now? Corona and Brexit make exporting to the UK a risky endeavor. The German credit insurance brokers recently clarified what the risks are and how you can protect yourself against them. Customs clutter and Brexit paperwork at the borders. The motivation to do business with British companies has not exactly increased with such complications since Brexit. But how dangerous is it really to trade with British companies? And can you insure yourself against it if you're an owner of a company? The German credit insurance brokers have dealt particularly intensively with these questions. They usually help suppliers to take out the appropriate trade credit insurance. Petra Fuchs, head of the International Association of Credit Insurance Brokers, BARDO, answered the most important questions in a newspaper interview. Has it become riskier to do business with UK companies, and can you protect yourself against it? It has indeed become riskier, and we advise companies to protect themselves against possible defaults, she said. The combination of Brexit and Corona makes it even more difficult to foresee future developments with British companies. The British are already in the third lockdown within 12 months. One should keep a close eye on the creditworthiness of British customers. According to our observation, she says, the companies that trade in mineral and metal products, as well as the automotive, mechanical engineering, chemical and textile industries, are most affected. Germany has to reckon with around 2 billion euros in export losses due to Brexit. The EU losses were originally estimated at 18 billion euros, but should actually amount to around 10 billion euros. The current figures I told you at the beginning of the video. They are not as high as initially feared, as the lockdown also caused consumption and demand to decline. In addition, the question arises in the United Kingdom as to whether and to what extent a wave of bankruptcies may come and how much this will burden the economy. The effects of the combination of Brexit and Corona could be more serious for them than for us. How difficult is it currently to insure subsidiaries in the UK in a German credit insurance contract? And Ms. Fuchs said, so far the situation has been like this. If a German company had a subsidiary in Great Britain, for example, this could be included in the German credit insurance contract. Since the United Kingdom left the EU on January 31st, 2020, and the transition period ended on January 1st, 2021, the UK has now been considered a third country. And that means a third country is a non-EEA and non-EU country. This means that other options for drafting contracts must be considered in the future with the following options. Option 1 is these risks are hedged in German contracts with a so-called financial interest clause. This extends the insurance cover against financial losses through impairment of the German parent company's investments in risks or companies in Great Britain. And option 2 is transferring UK risks into local contracts. Which option is most suitable for a company in terms of content and price depends on various criteria. Overall, it pays to seek expert help from specialized credit insurance brokers when choosing an insurer and drafting the contract, because wrong decisions can be expensive, she said. A change in the law on the taxation of co-insured companies in so-called third countries may also result in double taxation for UK risks in a German credit insurance contract. In addition to the local UK tax, the German insurance tax is then also charged. Has it become more expensive to insure the movement of goods to the UK? That's an interesting one, isn't it? It is certain that bad debt insurance will become more expensive due to the pandemic and the uncertainty about future economic developments. Some providers have already reacted and raised their premiums. However, there are differences from provider to provider, and a market comparison is always worthwhile. The insurers differ greatly in the way they design their conditions and in the wording. And special credit insurance brokers like Mrs. Fuchs, who's advertising a bit in this interview, of course, says she has a good overview of the market and can thus conclude the right contract for the respective company. And one more bit, because I talked about this on my global channel already. In the future, London wants to focus more on Asia and the Pacific region. The British government believes that the greatest threat to the security of their country comes from Russia. For the first time in decades of disarmament, the British government wants to enable its nuclear arsenal to be expanded again. This emerges from a document on the strategic realignment of the country after Brexit, which Prime Minister Boris Johnson presented in Parliament. According to this, the limit on the number of nuclear warheads that has been planned until the middle of the decade is to be increased from 180 to up to 260. This is necessary to maintain a minimum of deterrence in the face of the changing security environment, including a range of technological and ideological threats, it said. How many warheads Britain currently has is not officially known. It is therefore not clear whether the UK will actually increase its arsenal or just reduce its less than previously planned. The Association of American Scientists, FAS, puts the British arsenal at 195, of which 120 are deployed. A government spokesman stressed that Britain's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty would not be affected by the adjustment. The nuclear deterrent capacity renewal is part of a £24 billion investment in the armed forces, Johnson said. The government described the so-called integrated review as the most radical reassessment of Britain's place in the world since the end of the Cold War. The aim of the project is to make the United Kingdom stronger, safer and more prosperous, said the British Prime Minister. London also wants to line itself more geopolitically with Asia and the Pacific region. By 2030, the British government expects a further development towards a multipolar world and a shift of the focus to the Indo-Pacific region. This should be taken into account with the dispatch of the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth to the Pacific and Johnson's trip to India later this year. Part of this strategy is also the invitation of South Korea, Australia and India to the G7 summit, which is to take place in Cornwall in England in June, and the start of accession talks to the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement TPP. China's political system poses a challenge to the security, prosperity and values of Great Britain and its partners, which they want to better meet in the future, it said. At the same time, they want to have a positive trade and investment partnership with the country and work together on transnational challenges such as climate change. Great Britain remains connected to NATO and the Five Eyes Secret Service cooperation with the English-speaking countries USA, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, stressed Johnson. In the European Atlantic area, Russia is currently the most acute threat, it said in the document. Russia reacted promptly. Such announcements only confirmed Russian fears of an increased nuclear potential of NATO, said the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the State Duma, Leonid Slutsky, according to the Interfax agency. London also continues to see the threat posed by terrorists as a major threat. According to the document, the British government estimates a successful terrorist attack with chemical, biological, radiological or nuclear weapons by the year 2030 as a realistic possibility. To counter this, an anti-terror center should be set up, Johnson announced. A national cyber unit that carries out offensive operations against terrorists, states and criminal gangs should be located in the northwest of England. As a lesson from the pandemic, London also wants to create an intergovernmental situation center. I must admit, there's a lot of stuff in it that makes absolute sense to me. But one thing does not make any sense to me. Why increase in nuclear arsenal? We have reduced the nuclear arsenal over time because it is fracking enough to destroy this planet once. We don't need to be able to destroy it 36 times or whatever. There is absolutely no need for anyone to build more nuclear weapons. Of course, there are idiots that are trying to get the nuclear weapons that might not still have them, already have them, or might try to get them. But if there will be any war with nuclear weapons, this whole planet will go to hell. And it doesn't matter if it goes to hell once or 36 times. So that is absolutely, unbelievably nonsensical. But the rest, there is a lot of sense in there. We have to have a look at the details, but the general purpose is not going in the wrong direction from my personal view. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.